Unmute myself. Good afternoon. It's 1:38 now, so good afternoon to everybody, and thank you ever so much for attending the family and parent orientation for 2021-2022. My name is Ivan Evans, and some people often ask, let me just say from the outset, my accent is South African. I have been the provost at Eleanor Roosevelt College for the past 6 years or so. I would like to congratulate the families and the children on getting into UC San Diego, as Michael Miller noted, a very competitive university. This is a very special time, of course, for us all. After a very traumatic 2 years or so, we are all looking forward to an in-person first year at UC San Diego. And as Michael Miller also noted, this class must feel somewhat anxious and a little bit confused about what comes next. That's totally understandable. I would like to reassure parents and family members that we understand fully well the potent blend that defines the beginning of the class of 2025. I think Michael Miller has already sort of gone through what that class feels and can look forward to. So I'm not going to repeat much of what he said already. But we understand that the class is stressed, is anxious. True, they are often defined as resilient, and they are. And they are achieving quite well, what we ourselves never had to go through. So they actually are quite a remarkable generation. But from our side, the university has also learned a lot over the past 2 years. Just as your students, your children, learned how to adapt to remote learning, to remote instruction, to constrained and limited socializing, to complying with public health safety mandates and rules and policies, etc. The university as an institution also had to learn a lot over the past 2 years, and I'm quite confident that we have. We understand that parents and students would like to sort of go back to normal, as it were, to pre-COVID times. The truth, of course, is that we cannot go back, and we are not going to go back to those times. The ongoing pandemic has now radically changed our social and educational trajectories, and we have all adapted to a new world, and this is rather permanent. What is currently a pandemic will never really go away, we are told. Instead, it's going to become an endemic, a constant in our lives, something that is endemic to our daily lives, and we will have to learn how to adapt to it. And we will. Just as we learned how to adapt to influenza and the common cold, both of which are still with us and continue to threaten the health and lives of people to this day. So COVID will slip into a constant in our lives. I want to reassure parents that UCSD is ready for this new environment. UCSD was, in fact, one of the few campuses that housed large numbers of students in its residences throughout the pandemic. At one point, Berkeley and UCLA each had fewer than 600 students living in their residences, while at the corresponding times, UCSD accommodated 6,500. That was fall of last year. And over 14,000 began the winter quarter as residents on campus. And of course, we had to do a lot to ensure their safety, to ensure their socializing experiences were there, that the campus was tolerable, that their remote learning experiences were effective and good. And so we learned a ton over the past 2 years or so. And I would say that UCSD is probably a world leader now in adapting its environment to COVID. And based on that experience, the university is confident that your children are going to be safe on campus. We know now, after 2 years, in which we were almost the only university to keep its residences open and develop policy to ensure that students, staff, faculty were safe on campus. The campus knows how to ensure that positivity rates remain extremely low, much lower than the surrounding city, county, and the state. UCSD pioneered strategies for that kept the place and students safe. We were pioneers in using wastewater to detect the shedding of the virus. UCSD pioneered the use of vending machines that dispense free COVID detection kits that students could use. We developed reporting systems that returned results within 14 hours after the kits were turned in. We learned how to quickly isolate students, the very small number of cases that were positive. We were able to quarantine students to keep everybody else safe. And we also, at the same time, while all of this was happening, we learned how to provide remote and hybrid instruction modalities to ensure academic progress in each of the in all the different disciplines. The campus is very fortunate in this regard. It has an extraordinary abundance of research and professional expertise that has made the university a world authority in the COVID pandemic and in the response to the pandemic. One reason for the almost unbelievable response that the university generated, especially in the first 6 to 8 months or so of the pandemic, was the rich resources that the university actually does have at its disposal. We have an outstanding School of Medicine, which is usually ranked in the top 3 in the nation, and usually ranked as the #1 for attracting federal research dollars. We were very fortunate, therefore, to have somebody such as Dr. Chip Schooley, who is practically Dr. Fauci. He is that renowned and that experience in dealing with infectious diseases, which is his specialty. Dr. Chip Schooley assembled a very professional, high-powered team that guided the university's COVID response with enormous success, reliability, and safety. Some UC campuses, unfortunately, UC Santa Barbara, for example, have difficult access to local hospitals. Santa Barbara, actually, this is a real problem because they basically don't have a close-by hospital at UC Santa Barbara. In contrast, UCSD has 3 major world-class research universities, either on its campuses or within a 1-mile radius from the campus. We also have an innovative leadership that balanced the understandable fears and anxieties that COVID generated with a firm belief in science, research, and data. And so leadership came up with a pioneering series of fast-moving and pioneering programs that kept students, faculty, and staff safe, even at the height of the environment. We never really shut the university down, actually, and it was one of the few institutions to do that. And the safety record is extraordinary. So I would say that without any doubt that the university is ready for an in-person academic year. But we're also expert now in how to transition to a more remote experience if necessary. Many campuses are struggling how to deal with the possibility of a transition if they go in person to remote, where we feel like we've done this now pretty much for 18 months already. So I think parents have every reason to believe that the university will continue to ensure the health, the safety, and the academic progress of your children, of their children. Yes, true, there is no going back to the safety of a pre-COVID normal era. But the immediate future is under control. It has the virus certainly has changed the campus environment, no doubt, but everybody will remain safe, we are sure, if we all play our parts. Students, staff, faculty, and all visitors on campus will be asked to abide by campus safety protocols. These will keep themselves, their loved ones, and the people they interact with safe and sound. It would be great if parents could reinforce the university's basic message of confidence and caution and help manage the expectations of their children. Hopefully, parents will reinforce the message that caution and cooperation with health and safety policies are the foundation of the university's success in having kept the campus safe. I personally expect that we will have an in-person academic year, but I am confident too that the campus can and certainly will adapt to any change that the pandemic might force on the institution. So, parents of the class of 2025, I welcome you to our ever-growing ERC family. I'd like to keep my remarks short this time. I usually, speak for up to 3 times longer, but I would like this time to give the experienced staff of the college a chance to talk to you at greater length. And so, thank you for having confidence in UC San Diego and sending your children to a wonderful university, a university that now is almost always ranked as amongst the 14 best public universities on the face of the planet, which is a remarkable achievement for your child to have gotten into. I assure you that the safety and the academic progress of your children are going to continue apace. And so now I'd like to introduce Sarah Spear-Barrett, who is ERC's Dean of Academic Advising. Hi, Sarah.
Hi there. Greetings, everyone. I wanted to welcome you to this portion of the presentation and remind you that we will have questions and answers available at the end, but we'd like you to wait and listen to the presentations as we may cover many of the things you may have questions about while we're speaking. Next slide. I am the parent of a college sophomore who just moved into his first experience on campus last week, so I can relate to what many of you are feeling or what you are concerned about. The picture on the left is probably what many of us like to relate to. This is how we feel about dropping them off. However, they may want to see themselves more as the picture on the right. In reality, they may actually feel like you see them more on the left and you don't want to admit it. These students are superheroes. They have had to face a lot at 17 or 18, an already disrupted and tough time in their lives, at times when things always seem in a way of transition, and then they experienced a pandemic. They have shown us flexibility and adaptability, and as the provost said, resilience. You, as their supporters, can set the tone and remind them that we are all learning how to do this together, to give each other grace. We do all we can to face this and move forward so that we can get past it. And as my son's high school principal told them in 2020, they will be part of the history book that future generations will read. For many of you, your students are the first in your family to attend college, and we recognize and salute you in this fantastic achievement. But that can also mean so much of this is new and difficult for you and your student. For others, college has changed a lot since you were there, so be prepared for a learning curve for everyone. Next slide. One of the advantages of UC San Diego is our academic advising system. Most campuses across the nation would have 2 sets of advising, one that's more centralized and one that might be specific to their major. However, for us, our advising is divided up by our colleges, unique to UC San Diego, and their major department advising. Academic advising on the campus will be available, at least to start with, remotely to students, and then later may provide some in-person options. ERC advising will have a physical presence at the beginning, but with the masking mandate, we'll encourage students to meet with us virtually so we can see their faces and have a better discussion. We have a link on our virtual advising platform called Meet with an Advisor, and that will have the links for options so that students can easily find out how to meet with a college or major advisor. They won't have to search on everyone's website. If you look at this slide, you can see what we cover here in college academic advising. And I have a staff of 8 professional academic advisors who work with your students. We've already been working with them prior to when they enrolled. We created the new Triton advising site that they put in their information with. And we actually are in the midst of checking all of their schedules right now. So you can imagine that takes some time. We have a holistic approach. We work with them a lot to do referrals, and we're experts on general education and the graduation requirements for the university, as well as policies and procedures. We also work with students who experience some of those things that may trip up their academic experience. So referring them to us when they have questions to start with can usually be a good starting point for them. Their major advisors are more experts in their particular major area about graduation and requirements for the major, course offering information, graduate and professional school info. So that's one place to help them understand the differences to this. And they'll learn more about this one through the Canvas website they're going through right now. Next slide. So how can your students access college academic advising? Next slide. Looks like maybe Sarah's internet may have gone down or not. We will be available through Zoom to start with, as I said, for drop-in quick questions, online questions through the Virtual Advising Center, and 30-minute appointments once classes get started. As I said, we're currently checking all of the schedules for our incoming first-year students and answering lots of questions for them. So that's why we're not seeing them right now in terms of these drop-ins or appointment schedules. Are we able to advance slides? Go back. Sorry. So the next slide that should come up, Sarah, is the pie chart in UC San Diego degree. Sorry, everyone, having technical difficulties. I think maybe I will work on sharing my screen. Might be the way that we conquer this. Hold on 1 second, get to the right spot. All right, hopefully this is going to work for everybody as I share my screen. Great, does that look okay? Can you see the slides? Okay, so this is a typical slide at the UC San Diego degree. Again, similar to what other campuses might have, where they have a section of general education or breadth requirements for their major, and then possibly some electives, minors, or second majors. For Eleanor Roosevelt College, your students have already gone through several websites that have discussed what our general education requirements are. And those are also listed on the UC San Diego website as well. So they will take a 5-quarter sequence, Making of the Modern World, MMW, which incorporates the university's writing requirement or English requirement for many campuses. And they will also have courses in quantitative skills, science, fine arts, a foreign language proficiency, regional specialization, and proof that they've written a paper at an upper division level. For our students, many of these courses will overlap with lower division courses required for them in their major requirements. So these aren't additional, they're just meeting both requirements at the same time. This is what we call a traditional liberal arts degree, and it's there to provide students with a solid multidisciplinary preparation in humanities, natural sciences, social sciences, and the arts, subsequently allowing them to pursue careers in education, medicine, business, government, and other such fields. It's important to note, as I said, that many of these courses overlap with their majors and their general education requirements. They aren't additional requirements. They're just a way to meet their major requirements at the same time. So now we'll have to see, there we go. So let's talk about what's considered a full load. Generally, it's 3 courses per quarter. So the box on the left is a minimum full load and what is required to be a full-time student at UC San Diego. Students must maintain a full-time load for financial aid, campus housing, international visa status, and student athlete standing. However, sometimes there are exceptions that happen during the quarter. So we want to encourage students to see us if they end up running into some difficulty. So they're not staying on a full load, but not passing their classes. While 12 units is the minimum, we generally recommend 16 units a quarter if possible. This will help students to stay on track to complete their degree in 4 years. However, depending on what majors they bring in, their AP credit, some of those advanced students, they may not need to take 12 units or 16 units each quarter. So it is individual to each student. If your student is feeling overwhelmed, please encourage them to use the virtual advising center so that we can talk to them about their course load. Again, depending on their background, individual situations, if they need to work, if they're commuting, taking 12 units or 16 units a quarter needs to vary for each of them. A typical fall quarter schedule for your students would include making the Modern World 11 likely, AWP 3 or 4A, or possibly a math class depending on their major, a general education class or chemistry class, again, depending on their major and career goals, and then possibly another general education requirement. Again, this is just a general idea of what it looks like. Students can actually find specific requirements on the page listed here, plans.ucsd.edu. Each major has a general plan available to students that was created working with the major department and ERC advising. In winter quarter, we can start meeting with first-year students to help them start to create their own personalized plan. They've used these plans already to enroll in courses, and they've done a fantastic job. As I said, we've been checking their schedules, and they've really done very well in taking the correct courses and using their placement results based on what their major requires. But you can see in this particular plan, it's a major that requires math and chemistry. It's a biology major's plan. So it's a little bit different than those 4 courses, but again, these courses are overlapping between their major and general education requirements as well. The reason we have students wait till winter quarter to make a long-term plan with us if they can is so they get a sense of the quarter system, how they're doing with it, their course load balance, they're feeling secure in their major and that type of thing, because those things will change as time goes on. This is a typical schedule for, next slide. This is a typical schedule for first-year students, depending on their major. Again, many majors, as I said, require calculus, so many students may be somewhere in that series, Math 3, 20B, it depends on the course. We did send students a list of GE courses available for them in the fall to help them make selections. And I will make a very important statement right now, because I know a lot of people are concerned about this. We realize that some of our students are sitting on wait lists for courses. The advising team, with the help of trained orientation leaders, are currently reviewing every student's schedule and sending comments and suggestions to them, including open courses for them to switch to. Some of your students are not switching to those open courses, so they will sit on wait lists until or if time opens up for those classes at this time. At the same time, departments are reviewing enrollments in classes and will work to make adjustments where they can. We know that Making the Modern World and Math are working diligently to open up some more sections. It is always a guessing game as to where students will place in classes, as well as which majors they choose to pursue once they start enrolling. So departments then have to adjust after the process starts. Again, departments like math and chemistry, who are core to many majors, are working on that now. So we are encouraging students not to panic, but also to read their UCSD emails daily, as departments may send them email updates with options available to them. And they do need to be flexible and changing. Maybe they're going to have an 8 a.m. course. Maybe they're going to have a 6 p.m. course. That's where the seats are and where we have lecture halls available to them. Next slide. So there's lots of other academic opportunities that we want to encourage students to consider and be engaged in. Once we're out of the pandemic, which we hope will be soon, students will have many more opportunities available for them. At ERC, we currently list some scholarship and research opportunities on our website that are currently offering specific options for remote access for students. Freshmen usually aren't ready for these, but it's there to let you know that when they are, we encourage them to seek out these opportunities. We want to encourage students to participate in our study abroad global seminars, which allow them to meet some general education requirements, or go on our UCDC program, where they actually take classes and do an internship while living in Washington, DC, similar in Sacramento. We have a research scholarship available, the Trellis Research Scholarships, which allow students to receive a stipend while doing research, many internships, and lots of service opportunities available to students. So we want to encourage them to start to incorporate that once they feel comfortable with their course load. Next slide. One of the biggest changes will be the quarter system for them. If you look at this layout, you think, wow, look at all that free time. And if you look at their weekly schedule, it looks like they have a lot of free time. They can come home, or if they're living at home, they can help watch their siblings and help with the house right now, right? We tell students that they should treat their classes like a 40-hour-a-week job. Each 4-unit class assumes 12 hours of time outside of class time for studying. Many of them are used to daily homework or other requirements that keep them caught up. This is now on them to manage it. And how quickly midterms come up, often several in 1 week, often more than one final in a day. It's important for students to manage their time, and there is no time to slack off in the quarter system. Be aware of this, especially if they're currently at home studying, because there aren't really easy weeks for them or break weeks. So if you can help them think about that and managing their time, I think it will be very important for them and one of the biggest ways to conquer the quarter system. Next slide. So here's a big one for parents, always the hard one to talk about. UC San Diego is required to follow FERPA, the Federal Rights and Privacy Act, which protects student records. UC San Diego interprets this law very tightly. We consider all students adults when it comes to implementing this law and our interpretation of it. If you missed the Michael Miller presentation we had on earlier today, we will have a recording available of it next week. So I'm not going to touch a ton on parent roles in this. He had some great tips, and he had some tips on letting them go to try to handle it the first time if it doesn't work out. And maybe you become a supporter in that situation, but give them the power to contact people and follow up. Students can release information to you if they choose to, but they have to do a different form with each different office because we all cover different parts of their record. So it's really, really important for you to understand this. And I know right now you're all thinking, but I pay their tuition, or I filled out a FAFSA form for them. This can be especially tough for parents of our generation who have had access to parent portals to check grades to make sure they're keeping up. This is one of the big transitions for you and for them. Their educational records include grades and conduct issues, and it's important to talk about expectations. If you let them, you understand how college will be different and difficult and grades will be different, then they may be more willing to talk to you about it. I often tell students, parents don't love them for their grades or their majors, but often they feel your expectations, and especially for our first generation students who have additional weight on their shoulders to navigate this. If you can have a good conversation about this early and about your expectations, they're often willing to share. It doesn't work well to withhold payments and say, I won't pay your tuition without seeing grades, because grades are often not released until tuition's already due. But ask them questions, as Michael Miller said, and stop and listen for their answers. If their grades aren't as high in some of their major courses, maybe ask how they're feeling about that major. Ask if they're using those resources. Help them learn to navigate this. Again, I talked about waivers. Students can sign a waiver, but that won't mean we send you their grades. It means if you called in, we're able to talk about it, but it doesn't mean that you have access to things. Again, they are considered responsible adults who need to determine who will receive information about them. And we are prohibited from discussing information about their academic and discipline records with their parents. Next slide. In thinking about one of the biggest differences for students, I'm sorry, one more slide after that. Here we go. One of the biggest transitions between high school and college, or even community college, for those of you that have transfer students in college, is really at the time of high school, really what they learn, about 80% of what they learn will be in the classroom. About 20% of it is outside the classroom with homework, readings, and projects that reinforce what is taught in the classroom. The high school classroom is a teaching environment where they acquire facts and skills. In high school, they're usually told in class what they need to learn, what to read, and what specific things they must do for homework, and what to study for exams. There's not a lot of ambiguity to it. And in college, however, it is the reverse. Go ahead to the next one. So in university learning, as I said, it's really a flip of what you're seeing. Sorry, I'm also working my slides. Where really 20% of the learning is happening in the classroom and 80% of it is what they do outside of the classroom. And so students will have to think about whether they want to read all of the material assigned. And it's assumed that they've already done so before going to class and listening to the lecture. Students are not provided with notes, but are rather expected to figure out on their own what's important from lectures and what they read in their textbooks and readers. However, instructors are very supportive and hold things like office hours, and students can go there for individual questions and clarification. Professors often sit there with no students coming to them during office hours because students feel intimidated to do so. And we need to help them coach to go ask those questions. And we in advising can help with that. We actually have some information for them they're getting in their Canvas site to help them think about how to go to office hours. And college students are expected to take responsibility for what they do and don't do, and they must take responsibility for the consequences of their decisions. This means even decisions about knowing when deadlines are and how many courses they can manage at each time. So this is one of the biggest differences that students need to learn to manage. And we can help them with it. And we have some workshops available for them when they first start that may help with some of this. One of the big pieces is to remind them to ask for help. So I did see the previous slide does touch on a change in GPA and grades and expectations. Many students will find that your students got here with 4.2 GPAs, 3.9 GPAs. I'm really happy if they finish their freshman year with a 2.9 GPA. Over a 3.0 is fantastic. They are really experiencing a huge change. They are probably learning things they've never had to learn before, and as I just covered, in a new way. This may mean that their majors change and their careers change, and that's okay. That's part of what college is a learning experience for them. So I think thinking about, next slide, academic advising as their resource, that students need to have the initiative to reach out to ask for help at UC San Diego. We are here to help them, and we can do that, but we don't require them to meet with us each quarter. We don't possibly have the staff to be able to do that, but we are available to them if they reach out to us. Same with their major department advisors, and similar to what I said for office hours. So encourage them to use that resource. It's only valuable if it's utilized. Next slide. So homework for you is to remind them to check their UC San Diego email account, because that's the official means of communication. I tell them it's like if your parents got a bill and chose not to open it, they still owe the money, whether they read it or not. So they are required to do that. Encourage them to opt into the UC San Diego app on their phone. There are push notifications the registrar sends out about deadlines. Remind them that there is a new 4-letter word for them here, which is help. Have your student follow us on Instagram. We try to provide some information through social media as well. Next slide. And so reminding you that there are 2 gifts you can give your child. You've already given them the roots, and so now it's time to give them their wings. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Gallenberg. I'm the Assistant Dean of Student Affairs for Eleanor Roosevelt College. And on behalf of the Dean of Student Affairs Office, I would like to just offer a note of welcome to all of you into ERC. We really are looking forward to meeting your student and to being able to provide support and leadership and some co-curricular opportunities for them to complement a lot of the things that Sarah was talking about, or to fill some of their hours that they will now find themselves having. So how does our office support you? So primarily, we offer an open door support for your students. We really feel our role is to accompany them during their time at ERC, and oftentimes are the first stop if they have questions. We're able to connect them with lots of various resources depending on what they might be experiencing. They should have received an email yesterday that included a link to a page called Canvas. They will use this fairly extensively during their academics. And we also have developed a Canvas page as part of our orientation process. And in the Canvas page has a ton of various resources that they'll need in the first few weeks of the transition into UCSD. So I encourage you to encourage them to start working through the Canvas modules. It's also a way to get further connected to our staff and ask us questions that they might have coming in. We also are here to advocate if your student might need accommodations, whether academic or personal, at any point throughout their time at UC San Diego. We've also helped a number of times with health and family emergencies. I think, one of the things that you might be on your mind is, should our students test positive for COVID at some point this upcoming year? And we can be there to help liaise, to move, work with residents' life, to work with faculty if we need to, if your student is in need of any sort of assistance or accommodation throughout that process. And additionally, anything that might happen to your family kind of throughout the next few years. We also have some leadership opportunities. We have student council within ERC. So some of your students might have been familiar being on student council in the past. And so they might want to take a leadership position on council. We also have a number of student organizations within Eleanor Roosevelt College that are directly connected to our mission. We do an academic journal if that's something that they're interested in. We have a community garden and lots of various ways for students to continue to remain involved throughout their time. These are some of the other campus resources we partner with. There's tons and tons of places. And so if your student is ever overwhelmed where to start, please encourage them to come in and meet with us, and we can basically direct and explain what all these various offices do. And we work really closely with a lot of the staff who works in the various centers and other opportunities. So are happy to really help answer questions and direct students to where they need to go. And then finally, where we're located, we share an office space with academic advising. So Dean Spear-Barrett's staff, as well as our staff, are all located on the 3rd floor of the Eleanor Roosevelt College Administration Building. And so please, I encourage you and them to come visit us when you're on campus. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We have lots of things that we're posting. We're already in the works of planning Welcome Week programming. So as soon as your student arrives on campus, either if they're commuting or if they're living on, we're already starting to plan some activities, both virtual and in person. So really trying to help connect your student to other students and really start our community connection off strong. So with that, I will pass it over to my colleague, Ray, who will share a little bit more about housing.
Thanks, Sarah. And so the previous slide, as well as this one, you can see bits and pieces of our neighborhood where your students will be moving in a few weeks. So all of your students should have received part 1 of our move-in information, our welcome information, first things first. And basically, it's everything they need to know about where they're going to live, who they're going to live with, and how to prepare for that big move. And so hopefully you and your student have been working together to kind of pay attention to the information that's been coming in on the housing portal. So they've been able to access that room assignment if they're living on campus, and also be in contact with roommates, suite mates, or apartment mates, depending on where they're living. The information that was sent out to all of the students were also sent in concert with all the other colleges. And so many of you may know that ERC cannot accommodate all of their students in our neighborhood. And so there are students in our first year class who will be living just north of us in next door at 7th College. And then there'll also be transfers and continuing students who will be living in the south part of our campus in non-college affiliated housing called the Village at Pepper Canyon and the Rita Atkinson residences. And so those different areas all would have sent the same first part of information, welcoming you and then telling you a little bit more about how to access your room assignment. Now, part 2 of that move-in information will be arriving to campus, and that will be coming out next week. You should receive it. It'll be posted in the housing portal, and then you also receive it in the mail, similar how you did the first part of the welcome information on or around September 1st. And that will have directions to campus, the actual instructions for the move-in and testing at each location, and then a neighborhood map showing our area. And you'll see from our neighborhood map that the ERC neighborhood in particular is unique in the other from the other colleges on campus in that it was built completely together as one area. And so the neighborhood of apartments, International House, and residence halls, where all of our students live, are very convenient to classrooms, specific classrooms that we utilize for MMW, also with the administration building where Sarah Gallenberg and the Student Affairs Unit, as well as Sarah Spear Barrett and the Academic Advising Unit, is very convenient to where the students live, in addition to our own dining hall. So let's go to the next slide. And again, just a bit more about the information that was sent out recently to go over that information. And hopefully you will have noticed in that information lots of hyperlinks that you can click on to give you more information beyond what's in the letter itself. And so there where it says housing contracts, that should take you directly to the housing contracts page. So you can get a little bit more information about what is in there in addition to what's listed in the letter. Again, the important thing that needs to happen right now is to sign up for that arrival date. That arrival date is a combination of testing and move-in date. So when you go in, if you've done it already and signed up for a move-in time beginning September 11th through the 21st, any of those days would be open for a testing time and a move-in time. So whatever time you sign up for will begin with your test, and that's step one of that move-in process. And then step two will be going and picking up your keys and actually moving into your space. Let's go to the next slide. And so it's important that you do submit and choose your move-in time and move-in and test date by the 2nd. If you've already done that and things have changed, or you do need to make any kind of arrangements, you can do so up until the 2nd. But after that, you won't be able to change that message. Make sure that it is a time that you know you can comfortably arrive on campus, that regardless of what traffic is like or any other kinds of issues you may come in en route, that you would make it to campus by the time your testing date, testing time and move-in time is. If you come before that time, you'll be asked to wait until your testing time actually occurs. If you are late for your testing date, if it is after 3:30, they won't be able to accommodate you, and you'll have to make other arrangements for accommodations before coming back to campus and moving in. So make sure that when you do select that time, it'll be at a time you know you can make, regardless of any kind of issues with traffic or other travel obstacles. Another thing to prepare before you arrive is compliance to the vaccine mandate. All of you know that we do have a vaccine mandate, and again, those hyperlinks in that letter that are in red on this slide will take you to the actual language of the mandate. You have to comply and show that compliance by September 6th. So again, the hyperlinks on the letter that we sent you will take you directly to the area in the Return to Learn site that talks about how to submit that proof of vaccination. And if you have or are in need of an exemption from that vaccine mandate, that will also outline that as well. And for exceptions or a deferral, those need to be submitted as soon as possible, but no later than September 2nd. So they're time-stamped to meet the September 6th deadline to show that you've either met the mandate or you've made arrangements for an exemption or a deferral. Next slide. And did we freeze again, or? The rest of the housing information that was sent to you talks a little bit more about how to prepare. Basically, we want you to, it also talks a little bit more about the room assignment. So roommate requests are not guaranteed. So if students that were all given the opportunity to request somebody to live with if they wanted to, they would only be honored if it met this criteria, that they're a mutual request, that both parties requested each other, that they're same gender, and they were all assigned to the same neighborhood. So unfortunately, if your student requested somebody, but their contract was for 7th College, they wouldn't be able to accommodate that roommate request. Currently, all room assignments are fixed until the fall quarter. And so if you've been placed in a situation that wasn't one that you requested, it is something that has to stay until the fall. There are very few openings that occur before the start of the fall quarter, and a freeze is held by housing on any room changes until the third week of classes, when we know for sure there have been cancellations and people aren't coming, so we know when spaces are open to move people to. So if you do have inquiries about possible room changes, housing will send an online resource to get on a interest list approximately 3 weeks after classes begin. So just be on the lookout for that. Also on the website, HDH will not consider any room assignment changes that are based on a resident's known or perceived vaccination status. I know this question came up in the presentation with Michael Miller, and the Campus Return to Learn has made that decision to not cluster folks that have not been vaccinated together, because their modeling shows that that could result in a much bigger and more intense viral spread and outbreak should one happen. And so because vaccinated folks and non-vaccinated folks could live together if they are following correct protocol, then that is the best way to keep everybody safe, as opposed to the possibility of causing a super outbreak by clustering folks that are not.
Did you get tomatoes and stuff for Siri?
And so, so we can go on to the next slide. So I think,
Like I'm gonna go see.
Ray, I'm sorry, you're muted. I had to mute everybody, and so now I.
Oh, sorry, no worries. If we can go to the next slide, after we talk about the room assignment itself, hopefully folks have had a chance to reach out to their roommates, their suite mates, and their apartment mates, and have had a chance to get in touch with them. We do recommend that folks bring as small an initial move load with them when they come for move-in day, when that actual day happens, that they are only, looking at one carload, not several carloads, or a rental truck worth. You are, because of COVID policy, limited to only 2 helpers, whether family members or friends, to come and help you move in. And then it's always best to either plan ahead with your possible roommates and suite mates to decide once you get here to actually look at the space and then see what kind of space you're working with, instead of guessing, bringing a bunch of stuff, and then having to load it back up into your cars and take it back home with you. So definitely bring what you know you'll need, the essentials basically, limit it to 1 carload, and then be in touch with your roommates and suite mates to look at the space and maybe do some shopping ahead of time via Amazon, or going to the campus Target, or other areas. Lots of other shopping available are in close to campus that you can also pick up things to then fill the space out. So don't plan on bringing everything down that you think you need. All the rooms have different layouts depending on where they are. If you're in an apartment or in a res hall or at 7th College versus ERC, it's always best to kind of plan for just the essentials: clothes, your study materials, things like that, desk lamp stuff, alarm clock, those kind of things. And then when you get here, see the space, then you can go crazy with looking at other things like, do you need a refrigerator? Do you need a microwave, and things like that. Just a reminder, the apartments are fully furnished with full-size refrigerator, stove, no microwave though. So a microwave would be needed in the apartments. The residence halls are limited to smaller appliances, like a coffee maker and a small refrigerator and a small microwave. But again, if you are living with folks who are willing to share those kind of items, definitely have those conversations beforehand. So I think we're close to ending our time. So what we'll try and do is answer as many questions as we can. Let's see, we've heard about the housing crunch at UCSD. When do students start looking for housing next year? So all students that are arriving for this fall should just pay attention to their UCSD email address. Housing will let them know when housing will be available on campus for those who are eligible for a second year of housing. And then at that time, that's probably going to be at the beginning of winter quarter, that that information will come out from housing. And then at the same time, if they find out at that point that they're not eligible for housing following year, then that's when they would start looking off campus. So another question was planning to do their COVID testing on September 18th, but the test time is full. So unfortunately, you would have to choose a different test arrival date, whether it's Sunday the 19th or if you can arrive on the 17th. The test has to coincide with your move-in because you won't be able to be issued any keys unless you have proof of that test. And so if that's why we have the dates from the 11th through the 21st. So if you can't do that, then I would say just go ahead and contact the Return to Learn site to see if any other test dates would be available, but they'll more than likely ask you to either push it to another date, either before or after the 18th. Folks coming from Boston on Thursday afternoon, can you visit the campus on a different day with them? You can definitely visit your student after they've moved in. Unfortunately, you won't be able to visit them in their space. You can meet them for lunch at Cafe Ventanas. You can meet them on campus to do a tour, but students won't be able, after they've moved in, to have guests in their space after they finish moving in. So any visits that you have would need to take place wherever you're staying, if you're staying in San Diego, or elsewhere on campus for a meal, or to go shopping or something like that. Can both parents help with move-in? Also have a small sibling. So all the areas have indicated that if you want to write ahead and let us know that you need to bring an additional person, if you have a younger sibling that can't stay at home, go ahead and write to the residence life office, whether it's ERC or 7th or elsewhere, and they can make those arrangements. Certainly we will try and accommodate everybody who is here to help. The test is conveniently on campus for that first test because, again, it is tied to the move-in. So it is best that they get their test, that first test at least, on campus. It's an in-person test. And then once they move in, they'll go into what we call phase 1, where they'll have to test again on day 5 and day 10 after their arrival. Those can happen elsewhere, or we have very, very convenient self-testing vending machines that make it a lot easier. They won't even have to leave campus to get those other tests. Let's see, same webinar for 7th College. I'm not sure if one of the Sarahs know if 7th College has had their session yet already or not.
I think what I had said was I think it will be open to 7th College families because they'll cover specific 7th College activities and academics, and that your housing information should be pretty similar to the 7th housing information. So I don't know when their family orientation is set for, but it would be more specific to 7th students. So our students, just a reminder, will be clustered together with other ERC students. So they're sort of living, they're like a pod of ERC students living right next door to ERC. So they have the benefits of both, but their academics are tied and they can participate in our activities.
And just to tie that into another question, where students will be living in one of the living learning communities at 6th College, and they're an ERC student, they too will sort of have that best of both worlds, where they will enjoy all of the activities happening in the living learning community at 6th College, but they'll also be aware of ERC activities and involvement as well. And then going back to Sarah's point about our additional community at 7th College, they are clustered together. It's going to be about 300 ERC students clustered together in 7th College. Part of the question was, where will they dine? Cafe Ventanas, which you see behind me in my background here, is our dining hall that serves both ERC and 7th College. And so they have that, as well as another restaurant located in 7th College called the Bistro. And then the market is also shared by both 7th College and ERC, and that is where they can use their dining dollars, not only at Cafe Ventanas or at the Bistro at 7th College and at the market there, but at any dining facility in any of the colleges. Question about parents' weekend information. Sarah Gallenberg, do you know if there's the parent family address on our
Yeah,
slide?
so I just dropped the link in here for Homecoming Family Weekend,
Okay, awesome.
and the dates are October 18th to 24th for that.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah Spivera, did you see the question here about anticipating more classes opening up?
I didn't see that one. So
So
at this,
when do you anticipate more classes opening up? My student is on 3 wait lists.
okay. So as we're checking schedules, we are sending students a list of courses we know are open at that time that meet requirements. We know that departments are currently reviewing their enrollments and looking for open classrooms, instructors, and TAs. So it should be happening over the next week or two. We do tell students if they are on a wait list, they should be looking for courses that are open. So for instance, we have students who are on a wait list for MMW in the A lecture, but the D lecture actually has seats in it. So they're not going to open up more seats if there's already seats available. So they should be looking to switch lectures if they can. And they're welcome to use the virtual advising, the VAC Virtual Advising Center to ask us questions, and we can help them with that. But there will be some opening up. We just don't know which ones and how many. They'll do the best they can to accommodate, but we are limited by classroom space as well.
Ray, we got some questions about quarantine housing. Can you talk about that?
Sure. For just let all of you know, the COVID test that they're taking at the very beginning is an in-person test, and they're taking it regardless of their vaccination status, again, to determine whether or not somebody is may test positive for COVID. And then they go into phase 1, where they'll then have to take 2 more tests on day 5 and day 10 after their move-in. If all of those are negative for them, then they go into phase 2, which means that they no longer have to mask in their living space. Up until that point, they'll have to mask in their living space. If at any point during that time, during move-in or afterwards, somebody in the community, whether it's your student's roommate, it's your student themselves, or it's a suite mate, if they test positive, then they will need to quarantine. And there is quarantine housing that is just off campus. We've contracted with a local hotel for students to be transported to spend the 14-day quarantine. If students are living with somebody who's tested positive, it will be up to student health to determine if the exposure was enough for that student to also be placed into quarantine, even though they may not have tested positive. So we leave that all up to our student health professionals. And then we have staff that bring them to the quarantine housing for the quarantine period. All their meals are brought to them during that period, as well as any kind of all the equipment that they need to maintain contact with class if they need to. And then they wait out the quarantine. After the 14 days, and it's determined after testing that they're no longer a exposure risk, then they can move back into their space. But that protocol is what we had from last year, and it's one of the reasons why we never had a large outbreak on campus like other colleges like San Diego State did last year. It's because the campus moved so quickly to move people into quarantine as soon as somebody tested positive. Now the same thing will happen with our wastewater detection. Some of you may have heard about the wastewater detection that happens on a regular basis, where we randomly test the wastewater of different areas on campus, and if shed virus is found in that wastewater, those particular monitors are connected to specific buildings. If that occurs in the living areas, every resident of that building that is identified will be required to test. And then again, out of that, hopefully get sort of whittled down to who that positive person who's shedding those cells are. And then again, they move into the protocol of quarantine. And then results come back usually within 24 hours. So if, as staff members, we also have to test. When I've tested and gotten it in by noon, I've oftentimes saw it on my chart by later that evening, like at 10 o'clock. If it's after noon, between noon and 3, then it'll probably be the next morning that I'll see it on my chart, but it is very quick. And the tests themselves, they recommend, last year we were testing every 5 days. They're saying now that if you are vaccinated, that you do not need to test unless you have symptoms. And if you are unvaccinated, they are going to recommend that you test every week, again, like we had for everybody last year.
So I know that we're over time at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
It's okay, no worries. I know we've had a lot of questions come in, so I hope that we had an opportunity to answer a lot of your questions. A lot of your student questions will also answer at orientation. So in the next few months, both encouraging them to do the modules that are on Canvas, as well as coming to orientation. Our hope is that any remaining questions that we have about the beginning of the year will get answered through those venues. But thanks for being here. I don't know, Sarah or Ray, if you have anything else you want to say before we close.
No, just please, if you haven't signed up yet for orientation, please do so. And then also signing up for your move-in times.
And I think reminding your students to read their UCSD email is going to be really important, because departments may be notifying them when they're on wait lists. And that's also how they find out if they were moved into a class or not. And be, flexible as we go into this opening of school during a pandemic. The campus, as we've said, is reacting to everything with your student safety always first in mind. And trying to gauge and predict the future with a magic 8-ball isn't easy, but we've done really well so far. So I think helping your student know to be flexible and accept how we're doing this as much as you can will be really important for us to have a good, safe start to school.
So thanks again. You're free to go. We'll hang on for a few more minutes just in case there's any remaining questions. But thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, everybody.
Can I just ask a quick question? We got a move-in date, but we are unable to access the testing time. Our son got placed in 7th College. Is there a way we can, it says the second email will be sent to him, but it hasn't been.
So the second emails are all coming out on the 1st, is my understanding. But you mentioned that they